Hi, I'm Sarah Ventura, Senior Editor at Wine Enthusiast magazine. Today we're talking with Wine Enthusiast contributor Kate Dingwall. Over the past year or so, Kate has been unpacking wine's ride on the wellness roller coaster. In the past 2 months alone, we've seen headlines boasting both the potential benefits of moderate alcohol consumption and its correlation to lower mortality, as well as dire warnings from the Surgeon General that any alcohol consumption at all can lead to much higher risk of cancer. So will a glass of wine cause irreparable damage? Listen in to find out more. So Kate, I'll just start with the beginning. Within the past couple of months, there have been two major contradictory headlines about what impact a glass of wine or two a day can have on your health. Can you tell us about it?
So in the last 2 months, two very major reports have come out. The first, which came out in December, was from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, which is a collection of some of the top scientists and scholars in all three of those fields. And the report had some downsides. It found that alcohol does have moderate amounts can be linked to a slight increased risk of breast cancer. But the report also found that responsible consumption is linked to a lower all-cause mortality and a lower risk of cardiovascular disease and events, which was a big sigh of relief for people who do like to have a nice glass of wine at the end of the day. And then 3 weeks later, this report from the US Surgeon General came out, and it stated the exact opposite, that there's a strong link between alcohol and many different types of cancer, which was frightening, and it felt like a huge whiplash. And it was very understandably wildly confusing for drinkers, for non-drinkers, for wine lovers, for beer fans. Like, two of the biggest scientific bodies in North America are saying very conflicting things about the relationship between alcohol and health. And who should you be listening to was the big question on everyone's mind.
Yeah, so, why are these findings all over the place and who should you be listening to?
That's a bit of a tough question right now because science isn't perfect and there hasn't really been a perfect study analyzing the connection between alcohol and moderate drinking and things like cancer risks and cardiovascular health. There hasn't really been like this ideal golden study that shows the actual benefits or risks associated with drinking. And the ideal study, what scientists are thinking, would look like following people who have never drank over a long period of time and following someone who does drink one alcoholic beverage a day over a long period of time. And we just haven't seen anything like that come to life yet.
And that seems to be one of the big issues, like trying to get this perfect study. Is that a possible task? And, in your research, have you found anyone who's pointed to a way to be able to nail that down? How to even make that happen?
There are people have kind of come up with the what a perfect study looks like, but it would take years and years and years to execute because the ideal study would look at different demographics and different people and their relationship with alcohol over a long period of time. Kind of the closest thing we've had so far is the National Academy's recent report, which gathered a top panel of scientists and experts across all fields with this focus on alcohol and health, be it epidemiology or cardiovascular health. And they looked at all of the studies, and they did a very good job of looking at how they were conducted, the sample groups, the methodology, and the results, and then came to a conclusion based on that. So they really looked at all of the research out there.
So given all of the studies, which, we'll back up into a moment, some of the previous year's studies, which say widely different things. Does this seem to be the most comprehensive and well-researched of the various research?
I put a lot of faith in it, and I think it's super legit. The Academy is made up of scientists across science, engineering, and medicine, and they have a really, really rigorous approach to their reports. And their report was also commissioned by Congress and directed by the USDA. So that's a lot of faith, like right top line right there. And how they conduct their report is they assemble this committee and they post all the names on a website. And anyone can kind of come forward and look up those names and challenge someone's membership. Maybe they have a conflict of interest financially or intellectually, or they have some sort of relationship with the alcohol industry, which would obviously give them a bias towards the study. And this happened. There were two proposed members for this study who were kicked off because they had found a relationship in some capacity with the alcohol industry. So they are very thorough about making sure they're putting forward the best people. And then this committee then gathers all the data on the subject, all the existing reports, and they meet both in closed and open sessions, which means you and I can literally roll up to this session and see what they're working on, look at the studies that they're conducting, how they're analyzing it. I don't think a lot of people actually show up, but you can, which is the nice point. And I flag that they look at how these studies were conducted because a lot of the issues and a lot of the controversies surrounding these conflicting reports is that a lot of the studies there's a lot of kind of different ways people are analyzing these reports. Some studies in the past have compared people who do drink alcohol with people who do not consume alcohol at the moment, which does include people who maybe quit because their doctor was telling them that alcohol is really affecting their health, or maybe they had an alcohol abuse problem and are currently in remission and not drinking anymore. And that's not really a fair comparison. So there's a lot of studies that scientists think have skewed data because they weren't really looking at the right type of non-drinker.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Like if I was abusing alcohol for a long period of time and stopped, that doesn't really give me the same health as someone who hasn't drank their entire life. They shouldn't really be grouped in the same group. And then once this committee kind of comes forward and presents this research, it's then peer reviewed by a panel of like 10, 14 different scientists. So there's a lot of hands and a lot of expert hands on these studies. So I put a lot of faith in it.
And so, I mean, what's the deal with the Surgeon General study drawing such, the Surgeon General review drawing such different conclusions? Because this was, back to back.
Yeah, it came out within 3 weeks of each other, which was quite frightening and quite confusing for everyone. So, Dr. Murthy, who actually was the Surgeon General until Trump took office, he found evidence between 7 types of cancer in casual drinking. He also called for cancer warnings to be placed on alcohol labels, which is like a cigarette style warning on your Beaujolais. Even your White Claw would have this big cancer warning on it. He conducted his report in a very different manner from the academies. While the academies kind of gathered all the research, started from scratch, the Surgeon General's report is more of a review of all the literature, which includes people's interpretation of the literature, and came out to a consensus from that. So it's more of one person's perspective rather than a panel of scientists and scholars. One of the criticisms following the Surgeon General's report is that he didn't do a great job separating people who have 1 glass of wine a day with those high-risk, heavy drinkers, the people who are drinking in higher volumes, which, again, it's similar to the former drinkers and the complete abstainers. They shouldn't really be living in that same category. So it left a lot of confusion and probably increased a lot of stress surrounding that report. And to further that confusion, Dr. Murthy is no longer in his office. He left the post on January 20th. And we don't really know what the new Surgeon General will do, what kind of stance they'll take on this matter. So it leaves a lot of question marks surrounding the report.
Well, and I mean, this whiplash, well, it's the most current version of it, but there have also been other studies in the past that have made similar claims about wine's cancer-causing capabilities. There was a Lancet report or a couple Lancet reports, and then, the World Health Organization warning. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
We have seen the relationship between alcohol and health kind of fluctuate a lot over the past 40 years. We saw it with the Mothers Against Drunk Driving quite a lot in the 80s and 90s when there was a large campaign towards moderation, largely contributed to by a rise in deaths from overconsumption and driving. And then that kind of went back away in 1991 when French epidemiologists put forward the idea of the French paradox, which was largely popularized by Morley Saper, who was a journalist who put forward this segment. It was quite funny of him in a French bistro eating these like very indulgent, very buttery plates of classic French cuisine, drinking some wine. And he proposed the concept of if French folks eat like this and drink like this every day, why are their rates of heart disease and heart-related conditions lower than ours? And that repopularized the idea that wine can have positive health attributes. And then that's gone away in recent years as more reports like the Lancet study in 2018, which declared that alcohol is not safe for consumption in any amount. And then in 2021, a different international journal of epidemiology found flaws in the way that study was conducted. So there's just been a lot of flip-flopping on this.
Yeah, I mean, and going back decades, obviously, why do you think this is changing, and going back and forth so much?
A lot of it has to do with the fact that there's no perfect scientific study, and scientists have very different opinions. Everyone has different opinions on how these studies should be conducted, the role that alcohol should play in lives, and it really depends on who you ask. Although the noise around it has gotten a lot louder in the last few years as we see this rise of the non-alcoholic drinks movement and this rise of the new prohibitionist movement. And the latter, both of those sectors have a lot of money in the game now. So it's becoming an increasingly noisy and loud movement.
And I mean, there's a lot of talk and a lot of, all of the stats seem to be pointing towards people drinking less wine, drinking less spirits, everything overall. Are these, and we're hearing a lot about these neo-prohibitionists, what sort of impact is that playing on the science and the studies?
That is the hot topic of the moment right now. There are two major temperance groups. One's called Mobendi International, and the other is Alcohol Justice, who have grown in size and influence, and they're getting a lot closer to policymakers, is where it gets a little spicy. Movendi International has been around since the 1800s, and they used to be called the Independent Order of Good Templars, and have since rebranded in the last kind of 5-6 years for something a little more modern. And they were very key in instigating prohibition, like the first one back 100 years ago. They post a lot of blogs and Science Digest discrediting capital B big alcohol. And they're getting a lot closer to lawmakers. They were actually cited as a source in the WHO's 2024 report on alcohol. And this is very much a anti-alcohol movement. And these organizations are going a lot of money too. Rob McMillan, from the Silicon Valley Bank, pointed out that the Bill Gates Foundation puts a huge amount of money towards these groups, which is a lot of financial power and now starting to sway policy, which is a bit scary for the alcohol industry because it kind of removes the science from it.
Oh man, so we're getting big tech and alcohol as well now.
Yeah, just to make everything a little bit more confusing.
And I mean, do we see, there's a new administration now, obviously. Are there any expectations for where the science or these studies or policy will be moving in terms of alcohol and, the dietary guidelines and all of that?
That's a bit of a tricky question. President Trump notably doesn't drink, although he does own a winery. So there's a lot of kind of ifs and whats around what questions, if he'll continue with this kind of anti-alcohol movement coming out of the Surgeon General's office. We also don't know who will be filling that role. Maybe it'll be someone who's a little bit closer to beverage alcohol. Maybe it won't be. There's, a lot of huge question marks surrounding that. On one hand, President Trump is a notable fast food lover. Which obviously isn't super great for you. The last Surgeon General's report noted that obesity is the second biggest cause of death among Americans. But we're also not seeing a push towards cancer warnings on fast food, which a lot of the beverage alcohol people have been pointing out, which is one of the bigger hypocrisies coming out of that Surgeon General's report.
Well, and I think, these reports, they obviously make for great headlines. You've been doing a great job of covering everything that's been going on over the past couple of years. But the biggest question is, are consumers actually paying attention? Does anyone actually care?
I think the issue with the headlines being so dramatic is it is a bit frightening. I live in Canada, and 2 years ago, when the WHO put out its recommendation saying no amount of alcohol is safe, the Canadian government fell in line. And I remember I was going out for drinks with my cousin, and we're both big wine people. We We're both doing our WSETs around the same time, and we love going out for a glass, opening something cool. And the day it came out, we were sitting there, and she's like, I'm frightened. I'm looking at the headlines, and I don't think I want to drink tonight. I'm scared. These headlines have a huge shock factor, regardless of how much you know about wine, how much you read the reports, how up to date you are. They're a little scary. It's easy to flinch.
Yeah, I mean, and we're obviously hearing a lot of news about people drinking less, alcohol sales down, although, people are drinking better, which I guess is great. But do you think this has anything to do with these negative reports, or is this like a different matter?
I think it definitely plays into it, but we're at a weird time in the wine industry. The younger generations have this wonderful wealth of products that aren't just alcohol to consume. They have cannabis, they have these THC beverages, there's seltzers, there's all these sorts of fun things for them to drink. And they're kind of moving away from wine, which is a bit spooky as millennials are kind of getting a little bit older. We're watching our consumption a little bit more. Older generations are aging out of wine, and there's not really anyone filling that void. We're also seeing it's a golden age of non-alcoholic drinks as well, which is kind of fun. There's some really lovely products to drink if you're choosing to not drink. And we're also seeing a big vibe change in how we're consuming non-alcoholic products. Like 10 years ago, if you weren't drinking, it was because you were pregnant or had a problem. Now, non-alcoholic products are like very much a part of our lives. It's a very normal thing to drink, which is exciting because I'm sure we could all be a little bit healthier with our habits, but it's also taking things away or taking people away from the wine market, which is a bit scary for folks in wine. So there's just this many things going on at the moment in wine, which is causing people to drink a little bit less.
In addition to producing world-class content, did you know that Wine Enthusiast is also the premier shopping destination for wine lifestyle products? Just visit our shop at wineenthusiast.com, where you'll discover an amazing assortment of unique quality items guaranteed to enhance your wine experience. From glassware and accessories to thousands of unique wine gifts, it's like a toy store for wine lovers. And don't forget about protecting your wine. We are the nation's leading retailer of wine storage products. Whether you have 6 or 600 bottles, desire a wine cabinet or a custom-designed wine room, our free wine storage consultations will help you find the perfect wine fit for your collection. Visit wineenthusiast.com today. We bring wine to life. Brought to you by the Wine Enthusiast Shop.
You also just covered Silicon Valley Bank's most recent report, and that found a lot of the same sort of findings of people drinking less. But it wasn't just the shifting preferences. There's other issues affecting the wine industry as well. Could you tell us a little bit about some of those findings?
Yes, it is, like I mentioned, a bit of a scary time in wine. We're coming off 3 decades of just fantastic sales and growth, and the market's course correcting a little bit. There's a lot of issues with oversupply in California and Oregon and Washington. Demand is down across the board as we see people kind of reconsidering how much they're consuming. We're seeing premiumization a little bit. People are drinking less but better, which is a very good sign. And we're seeing that no and low alcohol movement jump. It jumped 27% over the last year, which is huge.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many different factors here, and health being one of them. I mean, in your opinion, what does this all mean for the wine industry? And do you think we'll continue to see this whiplash of headlines about whether or not wine will kill you with a glass or two a day, or if that's actually not going to have a health effect or just a mild to moderate health effect?
It's hard because it feels like there's so many different cards in the air right now, and it's really hard to predict how they're going to land. I know no and low alcohol is a big deal at the moment, but Rob McMillan pointed out during the Silicon Valley Bank seminar that there's not that much more space for that category to grow. You don't need hundreds of different brands of non-alcoholic wine, and it's also very expensive. So regular proof wineries can't really get into the no and low alcohol game at affordable sum. So there's only so much more space for that to grow. And I know it's been a bit of a darling category, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It's going to hit a bit of a ceiling, is what I'm guessing. The health debate is interesting and it's hard because there's so much movement from the neo-prohibitionist, as they call it, category that it's hard to break through that and see what the actual science is. And I don't think we have any reports at the moment which have analyzed the relationship between health and alcohol over a long period of time, so you can actually tell what's going on. There's just so much noise and clutter to break through that it's very difficult to see what the facts are through it all.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, given these headlines, we've seen the wine industry kind of starting to fight back a little bit with initiatives like Come Over October and trying to promote the, social benefits of wine. Is that something that's being discussed in these studies much or being taken into account? And what role do you see wine as a sort of social tie playing into all of this?
Well, I think, and Rob McMillan has pointed this out over the last couple Silicon Valley Bank reports, is that we need to do a better job at marketing wine as something that's very much a social connector. And it's lower in alcohol than spirits. It's a largely earth reflective product. It's very much an agricultural product, something with a lot of history and culture. And while we do a good job of communicating that internally in the industry, we haven't done a great job of that, of telling these positive attributes to new consumers. Someone pointed this out on the Silicon Valley Bank seminars. Tiger striping is a big thing now, where you kind of interchange alcoholic drink, then non-alcoholic drink, then alcoholic drink. And a lot of people are switching to low alcohol. And why aren't we marketing ourselves kind of a lower alcohol alternative to Tiger Strike with? Like, have a martini, then have a glass of wine. That might be a bit much. Maybe don't do that, but kind of consider wine something that's a little bit more sessionable than hard alcohol. Can think of it as a connector, think of it as a historical beverage of a cultural one. And we haven't done a great job of marketing ourselves as such to new drinkers, which may be why they're not coming over to wine.
Yeah, and I think the whole drinking less but drinking better is a really interesting point because I don't think anybody out there is saying that binge drinking is good for you. I mean, I think anyone who's had a hangover is probably pretty sure that that's not good for you. But, these studies are looking at a glass or two a day, and it'll be interesting to see where it pans out over the future, as people are drinking fewer glasses but higher quality bottlings, like where is that going to lead the industry?
And that's a very important point of all of these studies, as they're looking at like 1 to 2 glasses a day, one for women, two glasses for men per day. And that's kind of the bar we're looking at. Any more than that is hard stop, not good for you. But as we see kind of these premiumization trends, it makes a lot of sense that people are opting to drink a really nice bottle of wine instead of a bunch of vodka sodas or something in that realm. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in wine to position itself as this really cool product that's comes from the hands of farmers and winemakers and is very much entwined into agriculture and luxury a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and if you want to get into the whole regenerative farming debate, can actually, have a positive impact on the environment and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it pans out.
Yeah, and it's very hard to predict that right now because there's so many internal and external factors affecting wine at the moment.
And so, I mean, do you have any thoughts on, what's next, or if we're going to see another headline that's going to make us, turn our heads again in shock?
The United States is due to update their health guidelines this year, which is part of what the Academy's report was going to influence. So I'd be interested to see how that plays out. Obviously, the Academy's report was more had found positive benefits to moderate consumption, but it will be interesting to see how how the guidelines pan out. If we're going to stay to 1 glass of wine per day for women, 2 glasses of wine per day for men, or if that will lower, if that will rise. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, there's a lot to parse out over the coming months and years, I guess, and we'll see where things pan out.
Yeah, it's a bit spooky, but I think it's always good to remember that even with the rise in a slight risk of cancer, it's a minuscule amount. It's like it's point zero something percent. So you always have to remember, weigh your risks and rewards to it. One of the doctors I interviewed for the piece compared it to kids playing sports. It's like the most common reason kids end up in the ER, but at the end of the day, you're having fun, you're communicating, being social. So if that's a big part of your life and it slightly raises your risk of something negative, are you okay with that? There's so many beautiful life memories woven into wine that maybe it's worth a little bit of the risk. And everyone can make their own decision to that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that they're studying these things, and it's great that there are people scrutinizing the studies because, it has been a huge part of human history, obviously. And I guess we'll have to see where it goes next.
Yeah. As someone who works in wine, like knock on wood, but
Well, thank you so much, Kate. Your reporting has been spectacular, and we're very grateful for all of your really hard work on all the stories that you've been writing for us. And yeah, it's great having you on the Wine Enthusiast podcast.
yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to work with you in the written word, so it's nice to switch that up and chat.
When it comes to living healthier lives, contexts matter. Are you planning to change your drinking habits in the coming year? If so, how? We'd love to know. You can email us your comments and questions at podcast@wineenthusiast.com. Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite shows. You can also go to wineenthusiast.com/podcast for more episodes and transcripts. I'm Sarah Ventura. Thanks for listening.